This is a lesson that Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, taught me about the nature of church. And this isn't a lesson that he did consciously. It's not a lesson that comes from any of his books. It was a service which happened 12 years ago. And I bring it up because we're looking in church at bits of the letter of St. James, which is an amazing letter in a slight backwater of the New Testament. And it's often talking about how you should go about your life. And attacking actually the church. At one point he says, that there's a tendency, and remember, this is the early church, this could be 60s AD, for when someone rich comes into church, people say, oh, look, please, could you sit here? And when someone poor comes in, they go, oh, well, whatever, go wherever, and not to pay attention to the poor person. And you think, well, A, that's obvious, that, you shouldn't make a difference. B, it's a disappointment it happened so early in the church's life. But C, I think it still happens now, and I'm going to describe a moment when I think I was guilty of this. It was 12 years ago at a previous parish in Lambeth, and it was the time actually Rowan Williams was stepping down from being the Archbishop of Canterbury. I was just an assistant priest in this parish with other responsibilities. But anyway, the idea was that when Rowan Williams was stepping down, as a deanery, Lambeth would thank him and say goodbye. Thank you for living in Lambeth, because he's been living in Lambeth Palace. And we'd do a deanery evensong. And Rowan Williams duly said, oh, he's happy to come. He didn't want to preach, because I think he'd preached enough by then. But he was happy to sing in the choir, and he'd give a blessing at the end. And everyone was kind of quite pleased, because, the Archbishop of Canterbury is coming to town. This is a big bananas. So everyone is a bit nervous, and my job, different clergy were deputed to do different things. Someone was in the vestry, someone was here. My job was to be sort of front of house to make sure when people came in, they were seated at the right place. And it was a fun parish with loads of interesting people. There were people who were charity workers, legal staff, there were civil servants, there were all sorts of stuff. So I was thinking, there'll be loads of people for Rowan Williams to talk to. 25 minutes before the service starts, in walks someone who I don't know, so it doesn't matter because it's a deanery service. I live in a parish, there'll be loads of people around, I don't know. I guess she's in her 70s, but it's what she's wearing which is kind of makes me think twice, because she was wearing a leopard skin cat suit and a sort of possibly fake fur coat over the top. Or maybe it was a real fur coat. But just on the cat suit, if you were a supermodel and 21 and going to a nightclub, I guess you could probably pull off this leopard skin cat suit. But she was not 21 and a supermodel, and it's not the kind of normal outfit that someone in their 70s comes to a church service in. Anyway, she walks right in, and then comes in, and then sits at the very front, which of course is a very un-Anglican thing to do. Everyone normally sits at the back or in the middle at best. Sits in the front row. But here's my confession. What I was secretly thinking now was, just when we're wanting to put our best foot forward in front of the Archbishop, someone very eccentric has walked in, and worse, I thought, how am I going to protect the Archbishop from this person? And she comes in, and then she sits there during the worship. And anyway, the service goes very well. It's, Rowan gives his blessing. And at the end, there is the customary, would you like to come for refreshments afterwards? And people are offered, sausage rolls and quiches and lasagna and bits of whatever on paper plates, and a glass of wine or sparkling water or something. And I look around just when it started. I see Archbishop Rowan pick up his paper plate with a sausage roll and a bit of quiche. He goes straight over to, who should he talk to? The woman in the leopard print catsuit. And of course, I had been seeing her as like a kind of problem. I had been completely in the guilty party and trying to say, these are the sort of people who we want to be in church, and this sort of person shouldn't be. Not quite shouldn't be, but I was a bit embarrassed by the fact that she was in church. And of course, she was probably much more interesting company than whichever accountant or lawyer or civil servant I would have introduced Archbishop Rowan to. Not only did he go over to her, because he probably recognised that she was the more eccentric person, no one else was talking to her. He was enjoying it. And I thought, my goodness, what was my problem? My problem, I think, was I just secretly bought into the ways of the world, which are some people are on a higher level than the others. They're not. We are just one in the sight of God. In the face of eternity, all of us are just souls crossing through this earth. But the temptation to see some people of higher status and lower status, even in church, is big. And we have to guard against it. And I've never forgotten that lesson from Archbishop Rowan. It wasn't in one of his books, so they're often brilliant. It was just the way he was and how he did his Christian ministry. He wasn't going to buy into the status of the world. He was going to live life as it should be led.